Good morning, everybody. Just give it a couple of seconds just for the technology to catch up with us. And welcome to the latest Joining the Dots webinar. So today's session is going to be all about eCall. So we're joined by Andy Graham and Danny Woolard from VESOS, who I'm sure many of you will know. And thank you for those who are joining us on the webinar today. I realise that we are in the middle of summer now, especially given all the heat waves we've been having. In the middle of summer now, so also welcome to anybody who's watching us on YouTube, because of course we do record all of the Joining the Dots webinars, and they are available on the Agilysis website and also on the YouTube channel. So a reminder of a couple of ones that we've had recently, had case by case. And the review of the Stats 19 use, not last month, in May. They are also available to watch via YouTube, and there's a handy link there for any of you that can click on the screen, take us through to the YouTube channel, where of course you'll find the recording from today's session. But before we do kick off, also worth noting that we have released the date for the next Joining the Dots conference for next year. I realise it's some way away at the moment, so we're looking at 3rd of March next year. Conference is returning to Birmingham, so at the IET Austin Court in Birmingham, same venue as we had this year. So tickets will be on sale for that from the beginning of September. So do take a look out for those, because we will also be running a special early bird rate. So make sure that you don't miss out on that one. But I'm not going to take up too much time, because this is the point where I'm going to hand over to Andy and Graham to talk about eCall and how it's an untapped data source that can help save lives. So, Danny, if I hand over to you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you. My name is Danny Woolard. I'm one of the 4 founding directors of VESOS Solutions Limited. I'm joined by my colleague, Andy Graham. I'll let Andy do his intro at the start of his session. I'm going to start things off by just really giving you an introduction to VESOS, and then sort of talk about, what is eCall, just the basics, to bring everybody up onto a level playing field, and then hand over to Andy to talk about some of the recent research and talk about eCall in terms of stats and numbers, etc. Where are we? Right. Okay. So a little bit about VESOS. We're a UK-based micro SME, and we specialise in eCall data and solutions. Often referred to as the oldest startup in town. We started VESOS was formed back in 21, 22, but we've been doing some joint research on the use of eCall with a number of clients, and I've just sort of mentioned some of the projects there. Couple of projects for National Highways, for DFT and SADA. More recently, projects in European member states, and also some preliminary work in Australia. I'm just trying to look at how to advance my slides. So a little bit about what VESOS does. So through the research work we're doing and some of the pilots, the early pilots and prototypes that we've built a platform that we call tCall, and the objective is that it sort of basically does a number of things in terms of filtering, enhancing the data, adding attribute data to the basic eCall minimum set of data that's provided in the event of a crash, which I'll come to in a second. And one very clear sort of use case is really what we're trying to do is improve incident detection and coverage, not just faster, but also wider coverage. And there's one of the use cases is all about lost vehicles. We have also developed a number of analytical tools to be able to build a business case for, let's say, a road authority. So again, things to help build the understanding and show the benefits of eCall data. So we're on a common understanding. What is eCall? It is a mandated technology on all newly approved cars and light vans. It's mandated across all member states plus the UK. Around a third of the UK active vehicles have eCall today. Basically, either in the event of an airbag deployment, an accident detection, or the pressing of an SOS button, it basically sets up a voice channel to 999 or 112 in the case of Europe, to enable the operator to establish the occupant's status. Along with that voice call, a small packet of data is sent, known as the MSD, or minimum set of data, and that is sent to the public safety answering point. And in the UK, that's a service operated by BT. And basically, what we do within our platform is to create what we call T-call alerts, which make better use of the data component. This does not interfere in any way with the voice channel or the requirement on BT to triage that call to emergency services. And what our aim is, as I've said before, the data can improve emergency response time. So a little bit about what eCall does, that currently, if you look at the circle, we have an accident occurring at the 9 o'clock position. In the event of an airbag deployment, it sets up the voice channel and sends the data to 999. But in the current way of handling the data, that is triaged, and often the road authority, let's take national highways, might be sort of further on down the chain. So that causes delays. And what our aim is basically to take that MSD at the point of entry to 999.112, process it through our platform, and deliver that in a number of ways depending on the use case. So we can deliver that data to national highways as an example to set signs and signals. You know, what is the challenge in the UK? Well, plateauing of road fatality numbers. I'm sure you guys are much more familiar with that than we are directly. The incident detection on non-instrumented roads, on rural roads where most of the accidents occur, of course, is a key point for us. Is all about being able to advise emergency services and the road authorities that there is a problem, there's been an incident. One of our early use cases was working on stopped vehicle detection and the need to improve response times. And what we found from that early report was eCall is a good adjunct to existing technologies like radar in roadworks, radars in congestion, but more newer use cases in from National Rail, sort of railway bridge strikes and level crossings. And sort of just looking at variable quality in terms of stats 19 data, there's no look across from, you know, to give you any more information about the vehicle, and Andy can explain more about that. So that's a little bit of background. I'm going to hand over to Andy now to do some of the numbers.
Okay, thank you, Danny. In VESOS, we have a fine for every time we use the word accident rather than collision. So Danny owes me two beers on that. I'm sorry about that. So here's the trends in calls. So as Danny explained, the button makes a connection, or the airbag makes a connection to the PSAP, to BT999. You can then choose to be connected to the emergency services. So we focus on connected calls, and I'll explain that later on. But since we started collecting numbers, that's the growth in numbers of calls. You can see sometimes it peaks in bad weather or drops in COVID. There's also in there some false alarms, which we'll explain later on. But to give you some sort of quantum, since we've started counting, we've got nearly 900,000 eCalls have been made from vehicles in the UK, of which over a third went to 999, but that means 2/3 didn't. So these are false alarms, which we'll explain to you later on. Last month, 7,000 calls were sent to 999, 8,000 calls, of which 1,544 were airbag activations. So just imagine that's a vehicle that ain't going to go anywhere. It's a vehicle that needs to be recovered. It's a vehicle that can't be driven. And it's quite a good data source, because generally speaking, airbags don't go off without good reason. There are some exceptions to that, as many of you will know at the moment, but generally airbags are very reliable indicator that something has gone wrong. And since since we started, that means it's probably about 40,000 automatic airbag activations. So that's typically vehicles that have been written off because it's difficult to rebuild the dashboard. And we think there's some historic data value there, as Danny said earlier on, not for Stats 19, but also looking across at which makes and models have more eBag air call activations than others per vehicle kilometre or something like that. It's an area of data that we'd like to start looking at in due course. But that gives you some idea of the growth. As 2.5 million cars and vans come in every year and older ones get scrapped, even though the average age is now well over 10 years, it means that the number of equally equipped vehicles is growing. We should point out that you can also get eCall for motorbikes. There's an approved app called Real Rider, and some dash cams have got eCall-like functionality. So although it's just for newer cars in terms of line fit, there are functions that might help younger drivers and motorcyclists. So one of the things that we managed to do was to go to our friends in Ireland, Transport Infrastructure Ireland, and said, have you kept your eCall data? And they said, oh, we knew someone at some stage would want to research it, so we've archived it in a secure way. We anonymised the vehicle ID, so the VIN number of the vehicle has been anonymised, so we don't know exactly which vehicle it was, but we know enough about what make of vehicle it was to overcome some GDPR issues. So that's the growth of their calls. They've had a much more rapid growth. And the whole of Europe grows like this. And one of the reasons for that is that the UK has more newer car sales due to its fleet arrangement than most countries. In Ireland, the average age is a bit older than ours, so it's taking longer to come in. So we dived through all of their data and processed it and produced a map. And that's the map, and there's a few things to tell you about that. So blue are manual activations and red are automatic ones. So the first thing you notice is there's a couple of them out in the Atlantic. That's because GPS isn't perfect, and particularly isn't perfect when your vehicle has had a collision. And we'll come on to that. Also, you'll see some that appear to be in Northern Ireland. Well, that's true. That's because radio waves, as in mobile phone calls, that are made by the eCall system don't know about international borders. That's a good thing because it means that it's seamless, but it also means that you need to have some cross-border operations. The other thing is there's a lot of them. There was over 10,000 blobs there, which isn't very much used for analysis. So what we did was we snapped them to the road network that's operated by TII. So if you can imagine that that's the equivalent to the National Highways Network, you start to see that there's some pretty good alignment with road network. We haven't looked at all of the other instances in rural areas, so we threw away 3/4 of them. That's because our focus was on the TII network. Clearly, the trend would be the same as for the UK, in that there would be many fatalities, not on the major road network, but on rural ones. So we said, well, that's quite interesting. Let's go and do a bit more analysis. Let's go and look around Dublin. So for those of you who don't know Dublin, that's the M50, that's the ring road. The airport is around here, and you start to see some trends. So again, the red ones are automatic activations. So there's a cluster there, cluster there, cluster there. So when we spoke to our colleagues in the motorway control room in Ireland, they said, oh yeah, there's always a crash or collision there. There's always a collision there. Yeah, there's quite a cluster around the entrance to the airport because people are too busy trying to worry about their flight and not concentrating. But then we found there were some collisions that they had never had any data on in their system. And they were vehicles that had airbag had gone off on the road and they had no record of it, which is very interesting. I mentioned false alarms earlier on. One of the reasons that you get lots of false alarms is people go into a new car. They don't have a handbook these days. So you press the button to find out what it is. So here in Ireland, I won't say which part of Ireland, but there is a car dealer and there are over 250 eCalls made from the front lot where people went, I wonder what this button does. So there's a real education piece there. Somebody went down to talk to that car dealer about not encouraging people to press the button. What happens then, of course, is that a call is made. It has to go through to the PSAP. The PSAP has to answer it. In many cases, people drop the call because they're worried about it connecting, but that still needs to be investigated because it could be a vehicle that's crashed and the person can't speak, and it gets in the way of other calls. So we're trying to reduce false alarms. The other big place was a car hire desk at Dublin Airport, where obviously people got in the car, couldn't find the button for this, that, or the other, and pressed eCall. There's also, we have some anecdotal evidence of one particular Mark who has a light that a courtesy light that's between the two eCall and BCall buttons, BCall for breakdown. So no wonder people miss it. They're trying to turn the light on in the dark and hit the button. Normally it has a guard on it. You have to be do active tactile pressing of it, or move it, or hold the button down. But it's surprising how many people still do it. We get lots and lots of false alarms from kids who are left in the car. Lots and lots of false alarms from people who have just literally pressed the button because they can't work out where to park and stuff like that. It's very similar to 999 getting false alarms for people whose pizza hasn't been delivered. So the good news about that is we know where car dealers are, we know where scrapyards are, we can start focusing on reducing the number of false alarms. So what were the lessons that we got from working with Ireland? The first is that there were lots and lots of false alarms, but we could work out how to filter them out, just simply because if this vehicle has made 5 or 6, 7, 8 false alarms in a week, then it's probably the kids are in it. Similarly, we can filter out by looking at where the call is made from. So if it's on the road network versus a car dealer. When we looked at the time it takes to find a collision, we found a 5 or 6 minute time saving compared to using all the tech in the roads. Now that would have to be said, it's a very small sample, a few examples, but that's the time it could be taking, because it takes literally 20 seconds from the airbag activation for that data to be sent, and we can be processing that within a few other seconds. Like I say, there were far more collisions on rural roads. We didn't have the time to investigate those. That would have been very interesting. The potential for detecting lost vehicles on undistributed roads. So although I showed you the TII network, once you get out of Ireland, into the rural bits of Ireland, there's not much tech on those motorways. Again, vehicles could be lost there. We'll come on to that. So we see these cases as being for road operations people, which is a new one, because it was already, eCall was designed for the emergency services. But we think there's more we can do to help the emergency services, because the data isn't really being used very much at the moment. Not many people in emergency services are even aware of it. We think there's a lot to do with post-crash, post-collision analysis. Even though you've only got a minimum set of data, you've got the location of the vehicle, which would help against Stats 19 when some poor police officer has to fill a location in at 3 in the morning in the pouring rain. We've got typically three data points. We know the number of people in the vehicle. Like I say, we could get its VIN number, but we're trying to find ways around that in terms of GDPR. We know the power plant of the vehicle, so we know if it's an electric vehicle, which is really useful for recovery of crash vehicles. And then we think there's loads of third-party services we could do in the future. So subject to the appropriate approvals, the fact that a vehicle's airbag has gone off could be put into ways for approaching vehicles, making sure that we anonymise it and have high quality and all that kind of important stuff. So what's happening in the UK? The reason that we focused on Ireland is that there's various different legal opinions about whether road operators can access this minimum set of data. So there's data that we clearly don't want to access, but just this minimum set of data, there's still a lot of legal debate going on. The RAC Foundation, I see that Evo's on the call. There's a report coming soon from Nick Reed, which has looked at eCall, and I won't give away the conclusions of that, but they're suffice to say, they're very much in line with what we've been saying. But it's important to know that DFT are funding some work on eCall. So the first is, this is just the first generation of eCall with very, very small 170 byte data packet designed in 1990 something to go on a mobile phone. What could we want if the future for post-crash analysis? Do we want more data about the vector of the vehicle? We've been talking to people like Tim Nutbean about that sort of data. What more data could we pass through in real time for the emergency services? So things like We've got the power plant, but what about the states of the power plant and that sort of thing? We're doing a lot of liaison with the 999 committee, who are responsible ultimately for eCall, but also with member states around Europe, because there's literally millions of vehicles around Europe. So there are trends emerging there. We've also done some demonstrations of it. So we went to the UTAC Millbrook proving ground, where we fired off an airbag. There's a dummy there. And we timed it for how long it takes the data to get from the so-called vehicle, in which case a trolley with a dummy on. And then we broadcast that data to some vehicles and used Waze. So we were telling people that there was an airbag activation ahead. That was test data. It wasn't exposed to anybody else, but it gives you an idea of what could be done. And we're working with our friends at Hass Alert, who are working with emergency services to warn of emergency vehicles that are then approaching these incidents. I'm the technical director for the World Congress for ITS in 818 days, according to my spreadsheet in Birmingham. And one of our targets is that we will be showing the world how we not just use eCall data, but have hopefully by then saved some lives with it. So I think it's suffice to say that we're a bit frustrated in the UK, having done all this work for the last 7 years, in terms of we still haven't got our grubby hands on the data. One of the reasons that we work with Agilysis is that we focus very much as traffic people on kind of real-time data, but we've realised there's a real untapped mine once we've got into that data for the likes of the Agilysis team to start triangulating with other data that they have. But we are starting to get some traction from other European national road authorities who see what we're doing, who use eCall, who've got eCall data but don't quite know how to overcome problems like, for example, false alarms. And they realise that they're getting millions of vehicles a year coming into the system, so false alarms are only going to get worse, data volumes are only going to get bigger, and so dealing with those sort of problems now is becoming a factor. So again, apologies for the word accident in here. This is the way of presenting it, but to show that our colleague Alan, who pretended his nice Kia had a collision, and a police vehicle was able to find it, but also we broadcast that onto Waze. You notice we don't say what vehicle it is or anything detailed about that. We just say there's stopped vehicle ahead. The mechanics of that will need to be thought through in great detail, but this is the art of the possible. So what's to sum up? So we would say today that the data bit of eCall, as opposed to the voice, isn't used very well. You've got data like the VIN number of a vehicle or its location being passed by dictation. So here's a 17-digit number I'm going to tell you, and you're going to write it down and then use that. Is not very good. We want data to data. There's no doubt about it, false alarms are a problem, but we think that there's a way around that, which is a mixture of education. It's a mixture of better design of buttons in vehicles. It's a bit about filtering out the data side before we use it when we know it's from places like car dealers. But the other thing is that in many cases that data, that VIN number and so on, stays as a VIN number. It's not turned into make and model, which we think would be quite useful in terms of seeing trends across vehicle types. So what does our eCall do? It basically takes all that big raw fire hose of raw unclean data and it turns it into what we think is good operational information by snapping it to road networks, clearing out false alarms, adding other data. It solves to some extent the problems of false alarms. We're never going to claim that we're going to filter them all out, but it really makes it much more of a dependable source, particularly if you rely on automatic activations from airbags. We've seen very few examples of that being a false alarm. We think this would improve the emergency response time KPI for road operators. So you've got to get there, you've got to get on site within a few minutes. We think that knowing exactly where it is, what direction, all those problems. And we also think in terms of particularly those rural roads that don't have any verbal message signs or gantries or cameras or anything like that, but still have a much higher collision rate, that we think that this could be a way to deal with trunk roads and faster rural roads where people are still using Waze to get navigation or information and other in-vehicle services that are developing, but there's no way of detecting collisions directly. There's a few other things for emergency responders that we should mention. One is if you have had a pretty bad collision and your airbag goes off and there's an automatic message and the person is not responding, there's a particular team of silent call listeners who are trained about what to listen for, as if it was a 999 call. They are very skilled people, but that's another reason for not disconnecting the call. The system was designed to work on 2G and 3G. 3G is being turned off, but 2G isn't at the moment, and it roams. So if it can't find O2, it will work on Vodafone or EE or any other call. If you go abroad, it works abroad. It tells you that you're a British vehicle and the call number. So it works everywhere. Now, clearly, it's not going to work in some bits of Highlands of Scotland and Wales and so on. But basically, if you get a sniff of a bar on your phone, then given that it's got a good aerial in the vehicle, etc., there's a very reasonable chance that eCall will connect. The problem of lost vehicles, there's been some news in the news about that. Sadly, vehicles that are reported as drivers are missing. Takes time to find them. There's no evidence that we would actually save lives there, but at least the loved ones of the people who are missing would know relatively quickly rather than a few days. We'd like to think that we can make more reliable events, particularly with airbag activations. And the final use case is, do you remember I said that you can say, what service do you require after your airbag's gone off? And many people, not many, but a substantial number of people say, no, I don't need help, I'm fine, I'll get my vehicle recovered. But there are people who decline help who you do wonder sometimes if that's because they maybe have had a beer or too many or whatever. And so knowing the location of a vehicle that can't move, but the driver is now claiming that they'll be able to recover it is an interesting one. I won't go into more detail about that. But so you can see that there's a wide range of benefits. We like the idea of using the data. It was designed for use in a minimum set of data many, many years ago, and we still aren't really using it as much as we should be. So that's our half an hour of talking at you. I'd be very interested if you have any questions. We could go on for hours about this, but Steve, over back to you.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks, Danny. Great presentation. I know that I certainly have a lot of questions. Reminder to everybody, if you have a look for the Q&A button at the top, if you try and pop your questions in there, I'll make sure that they don't get missed. Or you can have a go in the chat as well, and I'll try and pick those ones up. So, I mean, first question that I've got is, you say that it's been in vehicles since 2018. Is that new vehicles since 2018 or new models since 2018?
So when a vehicle is type approved, i.e. it's you go from model version 8 to model 9 needs type approval, that's when it has to have eCall. There are some vehicles that haven't been upgraded since then, which means they don't have eCall. There are some vehicles that don't have airbags, etc. So Caterhams and things like that may not have them. But before 2018, there were still a lot of vehicles like BMWs and Volvos and Vauxhalls that had kind of private eCall that's still driving around, that in many cases still works. So 2018 was everything that's mandated after that. We did a test earlier this year, and we went through every make and model to see whether it had got eCall fitted, and it was in the high 99% of new cars and vans. So there's still a tail of things that don't have eCall because they haven't been type approved in the last 7 years, or because they're just simply such low volume vehicles, they're not equipped.
So presumably with the private eCall, they're the ones that are run by the manufacturer, so it's slightly separate from the standardized system.
So what happens there if you have a newish car? You might press the eCall button and it puts you through to a kind of concierge service. If you have had a collision, it works exactly like public eCall. They pass you through to the emergency services. If you don't pay the subscription, then the system has to default by law to the public eCall. So for 3 years, you probably get it bundled, and then you don't want to pay the money. What that means also is they have those kind of call centres are quite good at also doing things like vehicle recovery and so on. Danny, you were about to say.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add that there are a couple of manufacturers who operate sort of, third-party services, concierge services, but have chosen to elect to ensure that the eCall, which is obviously all about sort of detecting a airbag at a crash, they actually elect to use the public eCall service because there's the direct link to the public safety answering point. If, as Andy says, if an eCall goes off and it goes to the vehicle manufacturer concierge, then this adds delay because you've got the a further responder in the chain. And what we're trying to do is focus on the use of the data to speed up that response.
That makes perfect sense. So I guess it's similar to, I remember a few years ago there was that OnStar system. It was a popular in America, not so much here. So similar to that sort. And
of course now some people may be aware of the Data for Road Safety initiative, which has a number of OEMs attached. But our analysis shows that if you take the whole sort of vehicle car park, that 80% use the public eCall service, whereas 20% using third-party services.
I mean, the data still ends up at 999 if you have a collision. It just goes a slightly different route.
We were speaking just before we came onto the webinar about, even in the road safety world, people not necessarily knowing about eCall. I do have a quick poll to put up for everybody to see whether in your own vehicles you actually have the eCall system and whether you've used it or not. So I know that my vehicle, I don't have it, and I was aware of the system because I'd heard Danny and Andy speak about it before, so I knew roughly what it does. But what can I and can't I use it for? So it automatically triggers if the airbag goes off. Those manual activations, sort of how severe does the collision need to be for it to be sort of legitimately be used?
Okay, the guidance we've got from the 999 committee is if you'd ring 999, in other words, somebody's injured, you see somebody in peril, somebody in your car is having a heart attack or a seizure or something like that. If it's the sort of thing you would ring 999 for, then pull the button. It has the advantage that it goes directly through to the emergency services with the location and the vehicle identification and so on, which makes it easier to find. If you're reporting somebody else's peril, then it obviously not quite as useful. But the general review is if you would ring 999, pull the button. If you weren't going to ring 999 because you've got a puncture, then ring the AA or something. And that's kind of what we've been suggesting, and our friends in National Highways have done the same, which is if you see a vehicle stranded, you would be told to ring 999. So you could use eCall as well.
Okay, that's a great reference to use there. You also use the term B-call. That's one that I definitely haven't heard of before.
Right. So in many cars, you might have 1, 2, or even 3 buttons that all look a bit like they might be eCall. The eCall one tends to be marked SOS or eCall, but there's also a button which often has a spanner, which we call B-call, which would connect you to the AA or the RAC or the people who offer you your 3 years of car recovery. There's also on some cars another button which is your concierge service, which tells you where the hotel is and this, that, and the other. So no wonder people get confused about which button to press. And also, as I was saying, some cars up there is where the courtesy light is, and it's all in need of somebody to look at that in detail. The B-call thing is basically to report that your tire is flat or your car won't start. But again, people get those confused because I've broken down, so the spanner is probably the right one, isn't it? And it is an area where we live with some decisions that were made in the past that could have been better, but with millions of vehicles out there already, we can't change it.
Yeah, and
think about the future.
There needs to be some sort of public education campaign. As I said, I work in road safety. I have done for a number of years. I wouldn't have known about it other than hearing from you guys.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to see your poll in that quite a few people don't. Nobody's unaware of it. That probably says that we've been going on about it for quite a long time. I think the other thing is that we have been to emergency services control rooms, knock on the door and say, hello, we're here to talk to you about eCall. Have we arranged a meeting with someone? And on the way up in the stairs or something, saying, what's this eCall thing then? And you go, well, all these vehicles out in your car park have got it, you know. So again, awareness would be one of our real tools. Because
sorry, Andy, just another little bit of anecdotal evidence. One of the early studies we did, a little bit of mystery shopping, people going into, hearing from sort of car dealers that's when asked what the SOS button was, don't press that because it calls the police. So they're the sort of things. That's all part of the education process. That we did some work with National Highways supporting them on developing, and the good thing is that eCall is now in things like the Highway Code. So there is growing public awareness of it, but it's taking time.
Yeah.
Got a question here from, we'll give it 1 second to load. Question coming in about how do you deal with calls made by witnesses in cars, and is that a big issue?
So one of the concerns that witnesses to problems, to collisions and so on, basically, if you'd have rung 999 to report something that you'd seen live, then that will go through to the police as if it was rung 999. One of the challenges that we've got is that what we don't want is people to now start using eCall to say, I was cut up by someone at the traffic lights, because you wouldn't probably ring 999 for that. So again, it's an area that we need to explore. I think the 999 liaison committee that guess what we do a lot of liaison with have got various views about how we need to maximize the value of what we get for their operational services, yet still try and avoid overloading call centers. So one of the challenges is if we say report a car that's on fire, you get multiple reports of it. If it's on 999, you get multiple reports with different locations and different types of vehicle all reporting, whereas at least we know here we've got a cluster and it's around junction 6. So it depends on the force that it goes to, particularly. Almost everybody, when asked what emergency services do you require, they say police. We've had a few that go to the fire brigade where the vehicle is steaming after the crash and people are worried about being extracted. Some have gone to the ambulance, and you can even go to the Coast Guard, and we're not ruling out where those calls should go to. But trying to deal with people ringing in and saying I've witnessed something is very much goes through to the 999. All the voice stuff goes through to 999, and we're not touching that or doing anything about it. We're focusing on the data that's kind of left behind.
Sorry, Danny.
No, go on, carry on. That's fine.
I was just going to circle back to the part about breakdowns. So Eva asked the question. Breakdowns can be fairly innocuous, but in a live lane of a motorway could be quite severe. Is there a triage process to identify dangerous breakdowns relative to inconvenient breakdowns?
Not yet, but we're working on that with the 999 liaison committee for exactly the reason that we said. Hello, I've broken down. Yes. Well, are you? You could see that then a triage of are you in a safe place? Are you in a live lane? All that kind of stuff. Again, the data, if used effectively, would identify that was a call from a smart motorway, say, and smart motorways don't have any large shoulders. So again, using the data properly could help that decision. But at the moment, the triage is I'm used to using my words carefully. The triage is an area where we think it could be really improved.
And so thinking about the data, the kinds of data that are sent. So you mentioned that it's powertrain of the vehicle, VIN number, whether the airbag has gone off. Does it include the speed collision, the speed that the collision took place at?
No, and deliberately so. So in the international standard, it has 3 GPS locations. In the UK, we often only get 1 for a boring reason I won't tell you about. You could say from O-level and GCSE physics, given those 3 locations, you could work out the speed of collision, but it's deliberately designed so that the time gap between the 3 is a randomish number. So we can hand on heart say that we can't use eCall for speeding. Having said that, if your 3 GPS locations are coincident at the time of collision, then somebody has gone into the back of you. If one of the locations was on the main road and 2 of them are now in a field, then that's going to be an excursion and you need to start looking. So although we can't measure speed directly, we think that just from those 3 points, you could infer quite a lot of useful operational information.
And it's worth adding that because eCall is quite European centric, obviously it isn't just GPS, it is sort of Galileo. The accuracy of the location is pretty reliable and pretty high now. So you're talking about, very accurate locations. And one of the things that we did in early use cases about ensuring that we knew about vehicles hadn't transitioned onto the other carriageway, etc., on the dual carriageway, gone through the barriers, etc. So location is much better than it was in these sort of early days, early research, where GPS wasn't necessarily the most accurate tool. But with GLONASS now, we're certainly down to the couple of 3 meter mark.
You almost lane accuracy. So you could say whether something is clearly on the hard shoulder or thereabouts, and you could say something has crossed over the central reservation and is on the other carriageway, but which lane it's in, not quite, but you'll get there. This is where things like cameras and radars and things take a good part. So we've done a lot of work on the fusion of data and the triangulation of different data, because eCall's in everywhere but not in every vehicle. Radar's not everywhere but detects every vehicle. Cameras have to be pointing in the right place but give you really good context. ... Put them all together and you get a much better data service than just one.
And that was the subject of the last piece of work that we did for National Highways, looking at not true broad data fusion, but looking at incident fusion, about taking incident detection sources, number one, to ensure that you get faster response, enabling operations to set signs and signals, but also cross validation, places where radar is non-active, such as roadworks, etc. So it's a good adjunct, as we've mentioned in one of the slides, to instrumented roads, to radar, to MIDAS, etc.
We talk about connected vehicle data quite a lot, and there's lots of different data sources. Manufacturers collect huge amounts of data. What are the other potential things that could be sent? So presumably vehicle occupancy from the seat sensors or any other in-vehicle tech that could be sent as part of the eCall packet.
So in the current MSD, it has the number of seatbelts that were set, which is a indication of the number of people. So if you've got a 9-seater minibus and 9 seatbelts were set, then the paramedics probably need to send more than one vehicle. There is some quality of GPS data and information as well, so telling you that this isn't really a good GPS location, so you might look a bit further. From the vehicle type is separate out from the VIN number, as is the number of occupants and the fuel type. What could be added in the future? So I see someone talking about accelerometer data. That would be something that we've been talking to with lots of researchers, because that would be pretty useful. Done in Formula One, so why wouldn't we do it for road cars? It's an interesting one to do. The VIN number is subject to lots of people's GDPR concerns, but if you unpack that and turn it into make and model, you can get a little bit more about the vehicle. Then with the right people can go and find who owns that vehicle. We can't. I hasten to add that. So there could be a lot more in the future next gen eCall, and that's why one of the reasons we came on the call today was to raise awareness and say, what do you think should be added?
I just add on the subject to next gen eCall. So as Andy alluded to in one of his slides, at the end of the day, 2G, 3G, well, 3G has pretty much been decommissioned. 2G will continue for some time. eCall is one of the prime use cases for 2G networks. So there is a project in Europe known as X-Hero, funded by the Commission, really trying to set the standards are already set, but looking for deployment of next generation PSAPs to be able to handle 4G, 5G and beyond. So because the tech has changed fundamentally, 2G, 3G uses in-band being within the voice call, the data is embedded, whereas 4G and beyond uses packet switch data. So there's a whole different set of architecture. So all of the PSAPs across Europe are actually mandated to get their PSAPs to handle 4G and beyond by January 26. That's not that long away, but I think some of them have fallen behind somewhat. So there is a process to upgrade the PSAPs. Now, as part of that, the field within the MSD that allows additional data, what we're trying to do is to, as part of that project, where we're supporting DFT, is to develop and raise other use cases, including additional data regarding the number of occupants, and make sure that data is more, I guess it's hard to mandate data within the MSD, but certainly that is used more prolifically. So I think that's so there's lots of work going on regarding next gen eCall.
So the key point is it's minimum set of data, MSD. One of the areas that we're doing in this project is to look at vulnerable road users. So in particular, could people who are in vehicles that have been wheelchair adapted, could we do something with that? And we had long discussions with Motability operations about maybe doing something there. In terms of other types of vehicle, so some motorbikes, if you buy a BMW, you can have that as a eCall as an option. There are lots of people who have an app for motorbike use, and you think about motorbikes, it's not a great leap of the imagination to have a version of that for people who are on rural roads with bikes, horses, etc. We want to look at all of the wider use cases than just traditional car. Coach and bus are heading towards eCall. One of the problems about HGVs is you really want to know what this truck's carrying. So again, that's tied up with manifests and things like that. So it's a path we're going down. One of the things that we're really, really careful about, perhaps could be even better at, is asking people who are at the end of the chain, like trauma surgeons, what data they want, rather than as traffic engineers thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could include this? So there's various bits of data that we know could be quite useful from the people in the vehicle, but whether you want to start linking vehicles and people together, I'm not going to even start on that discussion. But the main call is if you're at the end of dealing with things on roads and you think it would be really useful for us to know, then please let us know. We went to see a fire service, and they got some really good equipment in their fire appliances for telling them where to cut vehicles. And they know what the vehicle is by typing its vehicle registration number into the computer. Wouldn't it be great if they knew that before they were leaving the fire station, because eCall had populated that? They were all very excited about that, instead of having to run across to the vehicle with a pen and paper and write it down and then type it in. There's all sorts of very quick wins that we think we could do once we've got the awareness arranged. So just to try and clear out a couple of the other questions, how do I differentiate the car that's collided? If it's a manual call, then it will be flagged as a manual one. The VIN number would go to the police. If they wanted to trace that witness, then they have the powers to then work out who the registered keeper is. I think we've covered the speed of collation. It would be great to say we could work out directly from it, but one of the things that was one of the promises was it's not road user charging system. It only fires up when you're press the button or have a eCall. This is one of the things where we can say, no, you can't track you, hand on heart. Mention about breakdowns. Yeah, so accelerometer data would be, we think that's a piece of data. Many OEMs already have got that. They could provide it, but don't necessarily at the moment because there's no channel, no necessarily way to use it. But things like having digital twins of human body that could therefore simulate or predict what the injuries might be given a particular vector of the vehicle movement would be very interesting. And like I say, it's the sort of thing that Formula One is. Those of you can see the pictures in the background know a little bit about Formula One. It's been exploring for many years, and it'd be great. Wouldn't it be great to start bringing that somewhere to the roadside?
What's the problem with the UK? So as we know that the VIN number is protected data, that would give us a lot. I know there's an interesting project going on at the moment. We mentioned Evo's in the call. He might be able to shed some light on it, about connecting historical data with what vehicles have different technology that's based on VIN number. But what else is the issue in the UK with actually getting access to this data?
So we've had long discussions with Evo about solutions to that one. It's been very helpful. The challenge is really that there are several bits of apparently conflicting legislation. One bit of which says you must share this data with road operators, and the other bit of information written before that says you can't share this data with anyone. And what's happening at the moment is various legal people are reading through all these various bits of conflicting information to decide whether or not we can get either a real time or a historic feed. By we don't mean VESOS, we mean road operators, DFT, etc. We're just the lubrication to try and get it. I think the difference between us and Ireland was that Ireland had thought about the problems of VIN numbers, so we lost that. But also we were quite keen to see what they had. And I think that there's a challenge, I think, because eCall wasn't invented in the UK. So people think it's one of these European things that was fostered on us. Well, it was, but it's means that vehicles that come in have all got it. And also because the awareness of it has been very poor. So people would say, oh, well, I haven't got that, so therefore there can't be that much data. So we're spinning a lot of plates to try and get awareness up, to try and get emergency services awareness, and particularly value. We're trying to show the value to road operators, which I mean, I've been working on eCall since with Andy Rook, who's one of our other directors, for 20 years. And one of the use cases was always get this data to road operators. They might find it useful. But because it never really happened in the way it was deployed, we're now sort of catching up.
But if you look at the original sort of specifications and requirements and early documents, and probably why we're getting sort of a lot more traction, I would say, with European member states is the fact that, you know, as Andy has just mentioned, that get it, you know, the road operator use case was always built in there. If there could be faster response by the use of the data, very few member states have actually deployed it as per the original specifications. So, which is common across a lot of European legislation. Tell people that they must do it, but not how to do it.
There's another factor, which is in the original business case, in Treasury Green Book, you have to include the cost of the vehicle onboard unit in all the calculations. Now, most cars go to the scrapyard without having had a collision. So you do the sums and you find lots of vehicles driving around with boxes that cost money versus the benefit side, which is still substantial, but millions and millions of vehicles driving around with boxes. Now, the fact that those boxes are now mandated and fitted is we might as well use the data from them. We mustn't argue anymore about the original business case. The thing about the UK, as you know, is that compared to someone like Finland or Greece, the original use case of finding lost vehicles is still there and still important, but less. But we were at that stage having a motorway network that was being more and more equipped with cameras and so on and so forth. With the rural road network problem is where the real benefits lie in finding and addressing those secondary collisions. But again, we didn't have smart motorways 20 years ago, which is a use case that's popped up, and again, we've been investigating that. So I think it's also the point that there has always been this, well, we won't use eCall data because it's full of false alarms. Well, nobody's really looked at false alarms in the depth that we've been able to with our Irish friends to understand why they occur and what they're all about. So hopefully we'll have some good news for you relatively soon. And when the RAC Foundation publish their report, I'd suggest you all have a good read, because it goes into much more depth than we've been able to today.
We are coming to the end of our hour. Just to for the last couple of minutes, what you said that there's lots of things still on the way and in progress. What would be your last ask for next steps as to what we as a community could really do?
I'll start, and then Danny will contradict me. I think be aware of what the opportunity could be. Don't write off eCall as something that's full of false alarms and doesn't work because you've heard it somewhere. Try and engage with it, particularly emergency services colleagues, in terms of the pressure to try and make use of the data within your own operations rather than necessarily just the voice. And I think this is just the start. You know, we talk about connected vehicles, we talk about autonomous vehicles. Imagine how's a driver going to report in a driverless car that they've had a collision. So again, and if we had a road safety investigation branch, then this would have been a lovely data set. So again, if we get an RSIB, that would be a really good use of that data.
I would sort of echo what Andy said. I mean, help us build awareness amongst the road safety community. I think that's the number one ask. The other thing is, in developing the new use cases, and I noticed a couple of the questions regarding sort of accelerometer data and your speed data, etc. But we believe that from our sort of I would say very basic knowledge, that there is a very clear evidence from the medical and the trauma community that having advanced data about the status of a collision is vital. It comes down to, those life-saving minutes, sort of, so-called platinum 15 minutes, help educate us. I think that's number one, and help sort of build further use cases for what we're doing. We've got a vast community of crash detectors out there, and in the UK, 11 million vehicles fitted with eCall today. We're just not using the data. So help us, sort of spread that word and cut through some of the barriers that we find to using it more widely.
Just to add to what Danny said, one of the use cases that's emerging is finding vehicles that are sitting on live railway tracks after a collision, which we didn't think happened very often. And there's been about 3 this year so far. They were at 3 o'clock in the morning, so couldn't have been a problem. But we all know from previous problems that could occur. So again, just mashing bits of data together. This vehicle isn't on a road network, but seems to be on a railway network. And again, we're exploring that because that's the sort of thing that is very much an edge case, but it's the edge cases that could have very bad outcomes.
Brilliant, fantastic. Right, that brings us to the hour. Thanks everybody for joining today's webinar. Special thank you to Andy and Danny as well. And keep your eyes peeled for the next Joining the Dots webinar, which should be taking place, I believe, later next month. Details will be announced shortly. But for now, thanks for joining. Yeah, thanks to Agilysis for organising. Yeah. It's been a really smooth job. You've done a wonderful job. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you both.